Thank you for that very kind introduction, Rishabh. Thank you.
So let me start by asking you the very first question, because I alluded to the fact that you are a patriot, and I do believe that you've done so much for our country. And therefore, let me start by asking you that as the government aims to build a Viksit Bharat in 2047, there is a lot of difference of opinion on what is the idea of India that is Bharat. What, in context of this statement, and given that you are addressing leaders of tomorrow, is your idea of it?
Well, let me start by saying the idea that we should become a developed country by the 100th year of independence is certainly a very powerful image. 100 years after independence, why shouldn't we be a rich country where everybody has the means to live a fulfilling life? So that's certainly a noble aim. Question is it just about the economics that we want that 100th year? Or is it about true flourishing of the spirit as much as of our well-being? And can the two be separate? Can we flourish in terms of economic well-being, that we have enough to spend, and we spend on everything, but we're not creative. We are not we don't debate, we don't argue, we don't have free speech, we don't have democracy, we don't have a powerful example to the rest of the world. We are basically all just sitting in our own little sort of houses and spending. But I think you really need both the spirit as well as the physical sort of means to live a good life. And that's the India I think we really want, an India which fulfills the dreams of our founding fathers, an inclusive India, an India which treats everyone equally, men, women, of any religion, any ethnic group, any state, any language, and gives them all, everyone, whether forward caste, backward caste, Dalit, tribal, whoever. It gives them all a chance to succeed. And if we can do that, if we can give everybody who's born as much as a chance as the richest person born in one of the high rises in Mumbai, I think we will have fulfilled our dream of what the father of the nation set out for us, that is an India where every last person is fulfilled, is happy.
Very, very articulately put, that what the father of the nation envisaged, that every last person should be taken along. And but a huge part of what you said has to do with the economy. And many people, right from Prime Minister Nehru to Prime Minister Modi, they've got different models when it comes to development and when it comes to economy. You have referred to in your books, which I have read, where you talk about saving capitalism from the capitalists. Now, Prime Minister Nehru would be, would have a very different perspective from some of the things that you have written, from my understanding and reading of your books. So, you've also mentioned that instead of reverting to development paths, we must look at truly building a truly Indian path. So, in these different models of development, what do you mean by an Indian path per se?
Right. So, this is actually very important and something we write about in our book, Breaking the Mold. It is with Rohit Lamba, who's an economist from Princeton, who graduated from Princeton, who's now at Penn State. The idea is that, India has some strengths. Amongst our strengths, for example, is we are a democracy. We have free debate. We have free thinking. We have the potential to flourish at an intellectual level. And increasingly, that is the direction the world is going in. If you look, and this is the example we offer of a typical global supply chain, right? How is something produced? And let's take something that many of our audience are familiar with, the cell phone, the mobile phone, right? The mobile phone, take the iPhone in particular. The iPhone is produced in various stages. Think of the first stage as the stage where it's conceived, where, in early days, it was Steve Jobs who did the design along with his designers, but also a lot of the patents, the thoughts that, the various apps, etc., all those were thought of in the early phase. And the phone was put together as a bunch of designs. And if you look at what is written on the iPhone, it says designed in California. Not made in California, designed in California. Why does it say designed in California? Because it's not made in California. Where is it made? Typically in China or Taiwan. And it is made by this company, Foxconn. So after the initial design phase comes the production phase. And production is usually by workers in Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, and now increasingly in India. But that's the second phase. And then there's the last phase. I'm skipping a lot of phases in between just for brevity. The last phase is selling it to the public. For example, through those swanky Apple stores and through the, there's a lot of content, the iTunes, the apps that you download, etc., which Apple takes its chunk off in terms of profits. So if you think about this as the supply chain, ask where is the value in this? Where is the value added? Where are the profits? It turns out the profits are on either side. The initial starting point where the intellectual property is put in, the design is put in, and the final part where you're doing the marketing, the financing, the selling, the advertising, and the content. The part which is manufacturing, actually not much value is added there. Okay? Now, why is that? Why is that? Because in some sense, that has become the most competitive part of the value chain, especially when you're talking about just the assembly part, where you put together stuff. And it turns out that Foxconn, which does this all for Apple, is worth about $50 billion. Apple is worth $3 trillion, about 60 times. Apple has done no manufacturing since 2004. What we're saying is the world is changing. And really, to capture the commanding heights of the global economy, you have to capture the creative part, the intellectual part, the product part, where the products are designed and made and become viable and sold to the rest of the world. The manufacturing is part of it. It's not irrelevant, but it's much less value than the rest. And so if you were starting, you had all your choices as an Indian policymaker, and you wanted to grab something, what would you grab? What area of production would you grab? Would you grab the manufacturing low-skilled part, or would you try and grab the upper part? It turns out that we're already doing some of that design. We do a lot of chip design in India. But we're doing it for foreign firms. We're not doing it for our own Indian firms. We don't do much assembly and manufacturing, but the government has a huge push to try and get more of that into India. That's all very well. We should try and attract manufacturing here. But if you want to spend money on it, where do you spend money? What we're saying is, if we really want to be a great nation in the next 25 years, we should be spending money on increasing our ability to produce that intellectual property. In other words, should focus on expanding the Indian mind, not in expanding sort of low-level work. That is what you want to capture. And what does that mean? It means start at the very beginning. Start to make sure that every one of our children gets the appropriate nutrition. Because without nutrition, your mind gets stunted. You can't actually think. 35% of our are this way. Then get everybody through good schools so that, improve the quality of learning in schools so that they actually can perform at school level. Many of our children cannot perform at that grade level. In 5th grade, we have around 50% of them cannot do second grade math. That is not, a sign of a developed country. We got to get all our kids through school. And then we got to get them into good colleges. Many of our audience are going to good colleges. We need excellent colleges so that each one of them is capable of competing with the world. Today, to make somebody who's competitive with the world, you just have to give them a good education, which they absorb. And immediately they go from zeros to hero. A good education makes all the difference. We have an example in the book I'll talk about in a second.
Right. So what you did mention in terms of building the Indian mind, it is important in order to talk about nutrition, it's important to talk about education. But I've seen that, the people who are in charge, who come from different political parties and backgrounds, not now, but even a decade ago, they have, and you spoke about chips and manufacturing chips. They seem to be carrying some chips of their own. And I say this very humbly and deferentially, because whether it be the education policy in 68, sir, and the same education policy, the National Policy for Education, which was in 86, and then the same NEP that came through in 2020, all of that essentially points towards 6% of our GDP being allocated towards education. It is no secret that the future of our country is shaped in our classrooms. But no government, sir, has been able to allocate more than 3 or 4% when it comes to education per se. And even in that, the spend per government has been even lesser. And because education is a concurrent subject, center does something, the state, if it's another government, does something completely different. You spoke about colleges, and many of these students go to very good colleges. But at the end of the day, sir, when it comes to IIT entrances, we've yet got a single-digit acceptance rate. We've got lakhs of applicants for minimal seats. The success rate at NET is about 7 to 8%. There's a massive demand to supply gap in education, sir. So what I'm trying to say is that everybody knows the gremlin per se. I don't think that, stating this problem is it's happening for the first time. Everybody perhaps even knows the solution to this. But somehow government after government has failed in delivering on education. And therefore the country, irrespective of the number of roads you're going to build, in my humble opinion, will never be able to reach a Viksit Bharat of 2047.
No, you're right in saying that the problem is understood, that we need more. I think, some of it is spending, but some of it is also incentives, right? I mean, think of the states that have done well in terms of primary education, healthcare, and even, good schooling. And typically, the names you come up with are Kerala, for example, and Delhi now increasingly up with its new policy towards the schools with the mohalla clinics and so on healthcare. And if you look at what's the common feature here, even Tamil Nadu had a very good schooling and healthcare system. The common feature in all these was a lot more decentralization than the average state. Now, why does that matter? It matters because in a decentralized governance system, the local authority has responsibility towards the local people. If the teacher doesn't show up, I know who to complain to. I don't have to go all the way to the state capital, and in a state like Uttar Pradesh, it's very, very far away, to complain that the teacher doesn't show up. I can complain to my local panchayat, sarpanch, and say, look, the teacher's not showing up. If the sarpanch has the ability to fire the teacher, that puts a lot of local control. But it also gives the local politician a way to, win votes in the next election. I improved the schools. That's what AAP is telling you. We cleaned up the schools, we repainted the schools, we changed the school curriculum, and in fact, now the government schools are doing better than the private schools. That is a big win. It's very hard to do that in a massive state where it's all centralized at the state capital, because you send, as you said, changes in education policy, nothing happens. Much easier to give a freebie and say, put my name on the newspaper and say I gave 1,000 rupees a month to this particular group. And everybody starts saying, thank you, sir, thank you, you give us something. But of course, the true benefit of government, which is public services, doesn't really happen. And this is an old feeling. I think you're absolutely right. We were a democracy, yet our average years of schooling, when we started liberalizing, were much lower than China. Part of the reason we don't have strong manufacturing is our workers. I mean, again and again, we've talked to a whole number of manufacturers during this book writing. They say, where are the workers? And you say, 1.4 billion people, why can't you find workers? You say, they're not skilled, they're not adequately trained. Now, we have some advantages, for example, on engineering capabilities. Even there, as you said, the IITs, the NITs, all of them produce really good people. But then we have a whole range of engineering colleges where the quality is much lower. There's a survey company called WeBox, which says 50% of Indian graduates are unemployable because they don't have the skills necessary for the degrees that they claim to have. So we can make it. Some of it will involve more resources. Some of it will mean better use of technology. We are just scratching at the edge of better use of technology, and we can do more. But some of it will involve politicians taking responsibility, not for building huge buildings and roads and statues and so on, but spending that money on improving the quality of schools, the quality of learning, so each and every one of our children has a chance to make it really big.
I'm so glad you mentioned this. I will take snippets of this and we'll circulate it all across, because and I hope that policymakers actually watch this, apart from the students who are future policymakers. So if it doesn't come about in terms of change now, at least in the long run, hopefully it should. But economists, just like many optimists, usually focus on the long run. But one of your more popular economists, John Maynard Keynes, has said that in the long run, we are all dead. And therefore, talking and making policy, whether on education or the Indian economy, is like playing, and I'll use a cricketing analogy because we are a cricket-loving nation, is like playing a test match. But today we are in the day and age of T20. So if you were in charge, therefore I must ask you, if you were the Rahul Dravid of on the finance ministry, if you were coaching the finance ministry, or for that matter, if you were in charge of finance, what would be the 3 measures that you would take in order to bring the economy to its desired, according to you?
Well, I mean, let's not look for magic bullets. That's the first thing. And that's why I'm saying T20 is great, is fun, but it gets over, right? What happens after that? What you really need is a way of connecting the short run with the long run, right? So you're absolutely right. We can't tell our people, you got to wait for 30 years till, we do all the right things, and don't even ask a question till then. You have to do short run measures. But those short-run measures have to add up to a long run, which is sustainable. It makes a lot of sense, okay? So let me give you an example of what I won't do and an example of what I will do. So today, in the state of Gujarat, we have a Micron plant coming. That Micron plant is going to involve some chip assembly and some testing, okay? So we're going to have we're going to have the pleasure of telling the world we make chips. Now, in fact, all we're doing is assembling them based on imported sort of components, but we can tell the world that. What are we paying for that privilege? We're paying $2 billion in subsidies from the central government and the government of Gujarat. How many jobs will be created? 5,000 jobs. That's at the ultimate will be created. Now, those $2 billion that are being spent on subsidies for this chip manufacturing, just for the pleasure of saying we do chips, is more than 1/3 the entire higher education budget of the central government. So everything that's spent on IIMs, IITs, all that stuff that the central government spends on, you're subsidizing a foreign chip manufacturer to produce it in India for that amount. So this is what I won't do. I won't spend money in this way because I don't think this is the way we should go. What I would do, right? One place where you can create a lot of easy jobs, but you can also create additional value. There's something called the Anganwadi. What is the Anganwadi? Many of our students from villages would know that This is a creche, a local creche, where you have an Anganwadi worker who focuses on nutrition and healthcare for the newly born. It's been a very successful scheme, but what you can do for the young kids who are in this system is you can bring another worker in, one of the mothers. Typically look for a 10th class pass or a 12th class pass among the mothers, and there are plenty of them. Get her to come in and spend time with the kids, teaching them the alphabets in the local language, if necessary, if in English otherwise. Let her teach them basic addition, subtraction in a fun way. And the same way she would teach her children. You don't need a B.Ed in education to do this. But some basic training would make the person capable of doing it. That's a job for her. But it's also an investment in our children. Because the Anganwadi worker today has only time for nutrition. This person has time for their brains. Put brains together with this. You're creating, how many Anganwadis are there in the country? There are over 1 million Anganwadis. You're creating over 1 million jobs. Not highly paid jobs, but better than that mother sitting at home. She gets employment. She learns to be in the part of the workforce. And over time, who knows what will happen? Maybe she becomes a teacher. Maybe she goes, gets a bachelor's somewhere, starts teaching in the local school or even in college. So there's win-win-win all over the place. How costly will this be? It's the salary of an additional low-paid worker between 20,000 rupees a month, right? Now, this can be afforded, but it's a huge and verified investment in our kids. People have run this experiment by putting that additional worker. It makes a difference in their learning, right? So what we need to think about is how we move from the short term to the long term. Short term is job for that mother, right? We desperately need more jobs. Long term is investing in those children to make sure that they're much better prepared for school, and as they go through school, they do much better in college. All the damage that is done, as my colleague Jim Heckman, who won the Nobel Prize, says, is all done before age 5, because you haven't given them the kind of nurture that happens in upper middle class households. You need to give them that to all our kids, and then we have a much better chance that we will become a Viksit country by 47.
Again, whilst many people will say what you are saying may not be the most pragmatic in terms of implementation, because it's an election year and they need to win. Lots of young policymakers and parliamentarians, elected members, me saying, Rishabh, these are good academic discussions.
Rishabh, there is nothing more political than offering a job. Today, the biggest hunger in India is a job. If you can promise a job to people, even a government job, I'm saying give them this government-funded job. It need not be a government job. Need not be a sarkari naukri, but it can be a government-funded job. It makes a huge difference. And so if you're talking politics, this is not apolitical.
No, but sir, what I meant to say is that the brow beating and the chest thumping that can be done when you are setting up a semiconductor plant, or you're setting up something and you're offering a lot of freebies, vis-a-vis something like this, which will take a little longer in order to fructify. The politics, right?
I hear you. I mean, this is why we have so many white elephant projects, right, in the past. Because it's always good to inaugurate something, whether it's used. And this is, in a sense, the danger of, we need a lot of infrastructure. But the danger of going overboard there is we get a lot of infrastructure we don't. And that's the problem that a bunch of countries, I mean, today China is in deep trouble because it has overbuilt in terms of even housing, which is a very important need for our people. So you have to be careful. It's always nice to be able to inaugurate things and to cut the inauguration rope and say, this is something I built. And they, eventually politics what is called the edifice complex. They want to build edifice after edifice. After all, that's what the the pharaohs of Egypt did and the Roman Caesars did. But ultimately you have to ask, in this modern world, is it the edifice, the physical edifice that we need, or the edifice of the mind? And almost surely the answer for India is it's the mind that we have to strengthen. Because once we strengthen the mind, there is no force on earth which can stop us.
No, absolutely. And what you've written, and you've written this in your book, Breaking the Mold, and you've written how, investment in the human mind is something that is very important. But to that end, not defending the politicians, because I definitely think that there needs to be a lot that they can do, they should be doing. But sir, I've seen this, that every couple of months there is an election in our country. Every couple of months, edifice complex comes through, because they want to showcase, saying that this is what they've done. Whether the statue unites or divides, that is another debate. But the idea essentially is that they want to keep inaugurating all of this per se, because it adds to the political heft that they carry. And it's, like I said, election season all throughout the year, unlike many countries across. Therefore, it's often been debated in our country, saying, let's have one election for one nation, and let's make sure that we only go to the ballot once. We select the government and allow 5 years of governance and not campaigning. When you talk about the economics of that and the viability of that, what are your views on one nation, one election?
See, I think it's a little bit of a side issue. I think that regardless of elections in each state, every state gets 5 years, right? And the national government also gets 5 years. The question is, what do you do within that 5 years? Do you actually focus on programs that will benefit the well-being of the people, or do you focus on something else? And that's where I think it's not so much the frequency of election as, what the people hold you responsible for. And that's where I think maybe much more decentralization will allow a lot more responsibility to filter down to the local level. And we get some of these public goods done in a better way. One of the big questions that sometimes arises why China did so well in manufacturing relative to India, which we talk about in the book, that Chinese officials were also hugely incentivized to increase growth in their area. Okay? So if you increase growth, you were promoted in the Chinese Communist Party. Now, how did you increase growth, given that the same policy that applied through the country? The only way you could do it is you broke the policies selectively for your local champions. You said, you want land? Don't worry, I'll take care of it. You want to, this permission? Don't worry, I'll take care of it. And, if you break the central law, that's okay. I will still take care of it. And as a result, what happened was they created a very different environment for their local champions. If you went to Shanghai, you had to buy, if any firm wanted to start and it wanted to buy cars, it had to buy cars from the local car producer, because that was the local government's edict. You want to come here, you play by our rules. And as a result, what happened was they grew their local economies in competition with each other. And you had tremendous growth in China. But the broader point I'm making is, it's not so much about the elections, but what you do once you win the election. We have this fetish that we have to win every election. We have to accumulate political power. But to what end are you going to do with that power? That matters hugely, right? If the objective of power is to stay in power, that cannot be the reason for winning elections. That is not Ram Rajya, if you will. Ram Rajya is you win power, or you are the king, in order to give to the people, in order to give a better future for them, right? I want to emphasize the point about education by giving you a really fantastic example we have in the book, which is this guy was Mustafa was a laborer's son in Wayanad, Kerala. And his father picks up ginger roots, puts them on a truck, and then they go to the market. So he's just a laborer. And, Mustafa is in school, fails in 6th grade. and then says, a lot of our kids fail and barely get dejected and they leave school, they drop out. Mustafa also drops out and starts working with his father. So one day, a teacher comes from the school, a teacher called Matthew, and comes to Mustafa and says, Mustafa, what are you doing? Picking up root. Well, do you really want a future like your father's, or do you want, to become a more successful person like some of the teachers and people you saw at school? Well, Mustafa's ambition is clear. He wants to be, he wants to lead this life. And the teacher says, come back to school. So he goes back to school and endures the sort of jokes and the criticism of his classmates, because he's one class lower and children can be very cruel. You failed, you failed, you failed. So he goes dejected to his teacher and says, what should I do? Teacher says, show them something. Focus on one thing and show them you're better. And he tops the class in math. And then that's sort of the beginning of a really successful year. He, tops the school, goes to NIT, does computer science, goes abroad, gets a really good job, gives his first salary to his father, and he says, father says, this is more than I earned in the whole year. Mustafa is happy. Mustafa then starts a company, ID. Some of you may have bought its products. It starts by making idli batter and sells it in a fresh packaging. Now Mustafa sort of employs 2,500 people. Many are people like him, coming from a disadvantaged background. The point I think we want to make with this story is, it is possible to jump across the class divide in one generation with the power of education. Mustafa is really determined. He's an extraordinary individual. I met him in Bangalore. But even without that kind of determination, I think it is possible. I've seen, for example, at the RBI, many of our class 4 employees, these are the people who, take mail between drivers, who carry mail between offices. Their children have become office managers, work for Infosys, work for banks, in one generation, because of the power of education. If we can get it right, we can do wonders. And the question is, how do we get it right? There's no higher priority.
The story of Mustafa that you narrated, that is very inspirational. And what you did mention about the fact that from a person who failed in grade 6, there's a popular movie called 12th Fail that has just come out on Netflix in India. I'm sure many of you, they're nodding in the auditorium. So this is as inspirational, and a story on Mustafa and a film on Mustafa should be made as well. But and what you've said is something that is so true of India, that in one generation you can bridge the class divide, you can bridge the economic gap that is there. But so you mentioned a very important facet in your story. You said that for higher education, Mustafa went overseas. Now,
let me correct you. He went to India only. He went for a job overseas, then came back to I.I.M. Bangalore to do his MBA. So he didn't go abroad for education. But yes, there are many people abroad, which is another issue we can talk about.
Which is what I was coming to, sir. That there are so very many people, and there is migration of labor that is taking place, not just due to lack of opportunities, but because young people and people just generally are very aspirational. And there's nothing wrong about it, in my humble opinion. And therefore, they seek a better quality life and they seek better educations. Now, in case of Mustafa, of course, he left his job overseas. He came back to I.I.M. Bangalore, and he's set up the entire company and so on and so forth. But the vast majority that I know who either have the opportunity to go overseas or be the ones who crave for a better quality life, they all are jumping overseas. There are record numbers in the last few years in terms of the number of people that have even given up our citizenship. So it goes all the way from going abroad for school and then staying back and making your career, to very many who've chosen a better quality of life overseas. Now, so this is a big issue, because this is just like what happened in the 80s and the 90s before the liberalization, where, as you would know, better, is that we had massive brain drain. Now it's the same phenomenon that's happening, but in this case, it's happening because greener pastures and perhaps not equal opportunity in country. What can young people, in order to, if they want to contribute to our country? A lot of my friends who are overseas now, they keep looking at me and saying, Rishabh, it's great tomfoolery that you're doing out there. The change on ground is not going to happen in 10, 15, 20 years, even in our lifetime. They say that you're wasting your time. What would you tell the young people out here saying that why should you stay back in India? Should you stay back in India? Why should you stay back in India when there is a better quality of life that's easily available in some countries overseas?
No, this is something that happens in waves. I remember that I was probably in the last few batches which went abroad in large numbers. Then we had the liberalization. And in that liberalization, a lot of people saw opportunity and stayed behind. And many of them started firms, some of which are very, very successful. Naukri.com, for example, started by an I.I.M. Graduate. So it happens in waves, and the sense of frustration that we're not growing enough comes sometime. And if we can get growth back up again, but more widely, I think there will be a turnaround. But that said, I do think that the fact that we have so many students going abroad for education is an opportunity. If only we could create better universities and more universities of high quality to hold them back. I'm working with a university in the South called Korea, which we created in 4 years. I mean, people say it's going to take 2 decades. Well, we've graduated our second batch already, and it's a very good school with very good faculty. But we need not one Kriya, but 1,000 Kriyas. And so we need that money. Actually, an undergrad education now is close to 100,000 in the Ivy Leagues per year. So that amount of money is spent for those 7.5 lakh students, right? I checked with the RBI, the LRS sort of flows, that's the special category that the RBI classifies. For just education flows is over $7 billion. So that amount of money, the real flows are probably more like twice or thrice that amount. If we can employ in creating good universities, it's a huge import substitution industry. We are preventing our kids from being exported abroad, keeping them here, training them in a really good way, and they will eventually, they might go abroad for PhDs and so on, but if they've gone through undergrad and masters here, they'll want to stay back in India and develop the nation. I don't think going abroad is a crime. I think at the same time, we must make it really attractive for people, especially our children, to stay in the country, right? And that means expanding their opportunities, but also expanding the facilities that they get training from. I mean, why would you force somebody who says, look, I can't get into a really good university. The only good universities I can get to are those that are being advertised by Australia here or by Canada here, and they go abroad. There's nothing to fault there. But I think what this means is we should improve the quality of our universities much, much more quick. And we can do that. We have a whole lot of faculty sitting abroad, many of whom would, for the under conditions, want to come back. This is what China has been doing. You want to learn from China, learn about how they've improved the quality of the universities in the last 15 years. That would be something to take away.
Well, very aptly put again that we must improve the quality of universities in India, and we need 1,000 universities that you've been creating. 1,000 of those Kriyas need to be created across the country, and very many more with the numbers that you give. But sir, there are only those many Dr. Raghuram Rajans, and there are only those many Kaushik Basus or Jamshed Baruchas that one can get. And I know you said that they do keep coming back, and many of them would be very happy to relocate to India and teach as well. But so my question in this is that that people like you make subjects that are dry also very interesting. The problem in India is that faculty and, both in higher education and school education, and with with utmost respect, not generalizing it, most choose it out of compulsion and not out of choice. Therefore, in order to improve education in our country, we will need better faculty and people to be able to explain concepts such as economics in a much better manner. I do know this, and I keep telling even fashion students or architecture students that economics is a subject that everybody must study. So this is going to go to very many schools across the country as well. What would you say to a high school student or a college student who is not as interested in the discipline of business, finance and economics as to why economics is a subject that they must study or learn?
Well, I wouldn't say must. I think there are lots of important subjects that might be even better. But look, I went through much of my education in India. Only my PhD I did abroad. I had fantastic teachers. So I think there's a lot of Indian talent. Of course, I went to really some really good schools, but there's a lot of Indian talent spread across the country. And sometimes it's not capability, it's motivation. How do we motivate people to teach? And sometimes, when there's a sense that there's a change in the university, we are getting more research funding. We are able to get some of the best people in the world to come back and participate along with us. There's a sense of new beginnings. And that can create a lot of additional sort of movement. So I would not, dismiss in any way the importance of our own sort of homegrown capabilities. And there are fantastic teachers, I think, across India and fantastic researchers. What I'm talking about is a nice, happy marriage. Sometimes not happy, but as happy as we can make it, of drawing talent from abroad, drawing talent from India, and creating first-class, many more first-class institutions in India to do the research, to do the development that we really need, right? I mean, I was talking to a pharmaceuticals manufacturer who said, look, why do we still do generics? I mean, this is a giant in the area, Yusuf Hamid. Says, why do we still do generics? He says, well, I can't afford to do R&D. In the US, it's the universities who do R&D. What we need is Indian universities who do R&D so I can take their product and go and sell it around the world. And so our manufacturers themselves are saying, we desperately need R&D in India. And now we're starting with the National Research Foundation, but we should make sure that it's not sort of driven by bureaucrats, that it is driven by professionals, by scientists, by the academics, and it creates genuine research. But to your point, why should people study economics? I think, there are a variety of subjects which you should know enough of to be a thinking citizen in the world. Some of it you'll pick up anyway, ethics, for example, but, some people actually study ethics and philosophy. But, knowing basic science, knowing basic literature, knowing mathematics, all this is important. Economics is important in it allows you to judge the policies that you see every day. And as a voting citizen, which many of our audience will become, it is important that you reflect on those policies and take a good decision. The worst thing to do is to say, this person is a good person. I don't care what their policies are. I'm going to keep voting for them. No, put their policies under scrutiny also and see if you agree. And sometimes you might find you don't, especially when you learn to discern what is good policy and what is not.
Well, you've thrown a lot of light on what is good policy and what isn't. And you've explained economics in a way that is important for building a nation of conscious and conscientious local citizens. That is what we need to do. At the organization, we're striving to do that. And your time is most appreciated. But like I did mention, that this is less of a Karan Thapar and Shireen Ban interview or a conversation and a more of a Gen Z conversation. With your permission, I will do one rapid fire with you, where you need to tell me, if you would, the first word that comes to mind when I say the following. Would it be okay, sir? If I
It's okay, but remember that I'm a dyed in the wool technocrat, so I will be very reflective on the word that comes to mind.
you are the one who's made the economics and finance achieve that kind of interest in our country, at least in the recent past, and therefore I'm sure this is going to be very, very interesting and exciting. But sir, when I say RBI, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Money.
When I say money, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Rupee.
And when it comes to rupee and money, the first thought that comes to my mind is demonetization. What's
Oh God, lines, long lines. That's what comes to mind.